Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to welcome you on Imaguru Startup Sprint. You know, for me, it's the first event since our office in Minsk was closed. And our team wants to thank all of you guys for your support, for words, for buying our merch, and for your souvenirs that you bring to us. Quite difficult time for our team, but we will move forward nevertheless and have productive events for you guys. And one of them is today. First of all, we thought about having Q&A session, but then we also decided to have presentation and Q&A session. I also want to thank you guys for sending quite interesting questions, and we will discuss them. And if you didn't do it, guys, I would give you a chance, and you can send your question during our discussion via Facebook comments on stream. And I will looking forward them and discuss after the presentation. And I'm glad to welcome our speaker today, Ingelstedt, WeWork Labs plus Impact Accelerator, investor and advisor. Jan is working for the Global Innovation Department of WeWork, helping startups from the Nordic, Poland, and Russia scale globally and partner with corporate looking to innovate. He also is program manager for the Impact Accelerator. They serve the best seed state companies in the Nordic and help them to amplify their impact. He privately invests in great teams with impactful ideas. So our virtual stage is yours.
Thanks a lot. Nice to see you guys. Like yesterday, what to talk to you guys about, and I saw a bunch of the questions that you posed as well. And I know a little bit about the situation that you guys are facing, and I really wanted to take the time to connect with you and tell you that we're definitely supporting you guys. I can speak for the whole Nordic ecosystem. We would love to support you. Whatever we can do for you, we will be there. So I think I just wrote down a bunch of observations that I've seen, and I can tell you a little bit more about me in a few minutes as well. But hopefully these observations will benefit you, and hopefully these observations are also true for your ecosystem. I really think so. I think they are quite universal. First of all, I wanted you to quickly have a look at this picture here that I choose as a background. I don't know if you can see it. If you have a dark setting on your screen, you probably cannot see it, but there is a small dot here. This is one of my favorite pictures. It's called the pale blue dot, and it's actually the Earth. And I think this was quite fitting given your current situation, to remind ourselves, like that is us. Every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. I mean, politics and governments and borders, that's all temporary, right? In the long run, and we can definitely transcend it. So that's a quote by Carl Sagan, which was a great explorer about 20 years ago. So some intros, a little bit about myself. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I founded my first company when I was 20 or something, and I've been continuing doing that. But I kind of understood along the journey that I can do much more impact if I actually help entrepreneurs rather than start my own companies. So these are some things that I'm doing right now. I don't want to go into all the background of how I got here, but basically what I do right now is to help startups in the Nordics, Poland and Russia specifically, connect them to investors, connect them to corporates, connect them to different partners, and help them scale and help them grow from early stage to Series A and also after Series A. As you presented a little bit briefly in the beginning as well, I manage something called the Plus Impact Accelerator, which is an accelerator program that we do 3 times per year, focused on impact and solving the global sustainable goals. And a lot of these startups are also expanding to Germany and the US and so forth. So I'm working a lot with international expansion. I also invest myself. I started doing that maybe 6 years ago. So I try every year to invest in maybe 2 to 3 startups. I don't come from money, so It's money that I saved up from my own salary and so forth. But I really believe in investing in other entrepreneurs and helping other entrepreneurs and being part of the journey. I don't have exact numbers, but I estimate is probably that I worked as an advisor to 300 plus startups at least. So I've seen a lot of things, seen what you can do good and what can go pretty bad if you don't think about it. And there is obviously a lot of mistakes you can make as a first-time founder. So I'm going to go through a little bit of the common mistakes and observations that I've seen. I don't think you have the possibility to unmute and tell me who you are, but I would love to maybe pick that up a little bit more in the Q&A afterwards to know a little bit more about what stages you guys are and what challenges you're facing. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn and we can chat about that afterwards. But I'll jump into the observations that I wrote down. So first of all, this is also a quote that I really like, and this is something to keep in mind, I think. A startup is a temporary organization designed to look for a business model that is repeatable and scalable. So your job as a founder is really to try things, right? It's to look for a business model that works. But it's very hard the first day to find what works. Normally, most startups have tried a bunch of different things before they actually find something that works. You can look at Airbnb, you can look at a bunch of different companies. They all try different things from the beginning and they pivoted. This is also a fact that is quite astonishing, right? And I think it's always good to start with a why, because 90% of startups fail. So really think about your reason, and you need to have a lot of motivation to do this. If you're not motivated, if you don't have maybe a 5 to 10 year plan and a focus, and if problem that you're trying to solve doesn't really speak to you, you should probably reconsider, join another startup or do something else. It will be difficult. And normally you have around 20 years of your life where you can actually focus and build a startup and put all the effort and the hours in that is required, and don't spend those 20 years on the wrong ideas. Really focus on the right stuff that speaks to you. Something that I think is very astonishing as well is the most common reason why startups fail. The number one reason is that there is no market need. Basically, teams are putting in a lot of effort, money, time, to build something that the market doesn't want. And that is a waste, definitely a waste. So really try to focus on the market. The other common reason is that the runway ended, so the money ended. They couldn't find more money, or the burn rate was too high. The team, I think that is probably the most important part. If you have the wrong team, you will probably not find out the right market need. You will not probably get the investment, and you will probably develop a poor product as well. So I think that if I can just choose one of those, I think the team is the most important. You should really try to have a strong and motivated team. Depending on where you are, I mean, if you're just starting up, this is definitely what you should focus on. But also, if you are listening in and you have a scaling business, if you have a scale up, you have a Series A company, whatever you have, I still think this is valid. You still need to define different hypotheses. You need to experiment, you need to validate, and you need to build, and you need to be very agile and be customer centric. So don't guess. Again, going back to the no market need. Don't guess what the customer wants. Ask them. Experiment, validate, build, and ask them, so that you're certain and also mindfulness of the resources that you have. You only have like a certain set of hours. You only have a certain set of dollars. This is something that Amazon is focused on, for example. Amazon is super customer obsessed, and that has been the reason why they have succeeded so well. So really try to stay customer obsessed and build great products. I think if you have a great product, customers will love it and they will refer it to others, and it will go really well. So I think the key thing is to really understand your customer and build for them, involve them quite a lot as well. And again, this is valid for any kind of company, regardless if you're just starting or if you're Amazon. this is what you should do, and this is what you need to do to be relevant. Something that I see a lot of founders come to me and they have an idea and they are really secretive and they say, you need to sign an NDA or it's very secretive. I cannot really tell you. There is always someone else with the same idea. Sometimes I have 3 or 4 companies coming to me with the same idea at the same time. And the one that actually wins and can produce something and get customer funding is not always the first one to start. It's definitely not the one that is most secretive. It's usually the one that is quite transparent, asking for help, being quite open with what they do, and actually do stuff. They build products and they stay customer centric. Stay agile. I think also be transparent. I mean, if it's not IP protected and that kind of stuff, if it's just an idea at this stage, be transparent, be open, ask for help, but also move fast when needed. So if you identified something, there is someone else working on it, so you also need to move very fast. Otherwise, someone else will probably build it. Again, going back to what I said before about the team, the people is what makes you succeed, but it's also what makes you fail. This can vary a little bit regarding what kind of roles you're hiring for and what kind of stage you are in. But generally, at least in the beginning, because if you hire fast, if you hire the wrong people in the beginning, your culture will not be good, and you will build the wrong things, and you will not have a stable foundation. In the beginning, it's also good to have more of a generalist, people that can do a lot of variety of stuff in order for you to be agile, right? Because if you have a very specialized team, it's difficult to test and validate and be agile and try different things if something didn't work out. Because specialists cannot usually do that. They're very narrow and good at special stuff. So in the beginning, have more generalists, and then as you scale, hire more specialists. Also focus a lot on the team dynamics. Super important that you have a straightforward and transparent culture in the team, especially in the beginning. I see a lot of technical teams, and I think the biggest challenges for technical teams oftentimes, not for all teams, but normally, too product focused. So they build and they build and they build and they come to me and they say, I'm going to show you the product, but I'm just going to build 3 more features. I'm going to build one in month, the MVP will be developed and so forth. But it's not the most important. I think the most important is to build as little as possible from the beginning and focus on the customer and only build the stuff that the customer actually wants. I think oftentimes they do this because they know the technical side, but they have kind of a fear for the market. They haven't been selling. They're not used to talk to customers. It's unknown territory. So it's kind of easier and it's safer ground oftentimes to build stuff instead. But if you are a technical team listening to this, be super mindful about this. Don't build something no one wants. That is a huge mistake. And a lot of technical teams do this. And then the funding runs out. Also, like I said, funding and sales, I think that is oftentimes a problem for technical teams because they're really oftentimes really bad at branding, storytelling, selling, marketing, all of those stuff. So it's usually quite like engineer focused and product focused. And it's not sexy enough oftentimes for investors to understand and also to invest money in it. For non-technical teams, they also have challenges. Oftentimes they underestimate the complexity of building the product. So they go out to investors and potential customers and they say, no problem, we will have this built in 3 weeks or 5 weeks and that kind of stuff. But they oftentimes miss deadlines and the product is usually very bad once it's built, especially if they don't have any technical co-founder, for example, because normally then they need to outsource development and they don't even know what to ask the outsourcing company to build. So that is complex. So the product is usually quite bad. Also, the runway can easily go away because if you don't know how much it will cost to build the product, then you might underestimate that, and also the unit economics would suffer a little bit. Also, talent, usually at least in the Nordics, technical co-founders is the most difficult to hire. So if you don't have a technical co-founder, you might run into problems hiring. Also, make sure to understand the business model. Is it B2B? Is it B2C? Why is it B2B? Why is it B2C? Is it B2B to B2C, for example? There are endless different variations, right? So really sit down and consider what is the best strategy. Also look at the different pricing models. Should you do subscription? Should you do traditional sales? Should you do a SaaS model, PaaS model? Really focus on this to make sure that you have solid unit economics and the business model makes sense as you scale as well, that is scalable. In terms of investors, I think that the most common question that I get is to get funding, right? Most of the startups struggle to get attention from investors and get funding. I think some strategies that I've seen work is to take references. So if you talk to investors, you can always find out who else they have invested in. Reach out to those portfolio companies, ask for references, ask the portfolio companies, hey, this investor, how are they? Do they actually support you more than the money? Do they actually answer when you call? Do they support you and give you a lot of value? And then use that when you get back to the investor and say, hey, I just had a call with your portfolio company X. He really recommended me to reach out to you, and I think we have a spot-on solution that you would really like, for example. So do your research and your homework and really find out which investors make sense for you to talk to, what stage you should talk to them, and also what they normally invest in. Normally, they wouldn't invest in something that is exactly the same, because then it's kind of competition internally in the fund, but they could definitely invest in something that is quite similar. Also, investors really like hype startups, so really try to hype yourself and brag a little bit, right? Brag a lot sometimes as well, just to get the attention. It's also good to remember that investors take calculated risk, so much like gamblers. So early investors, they take a lot of risk. That's why they also demand a lower valuation when they invest. That's also why they demand higher returns. So early stage investors, and early stage VCs, for example, they oftentimes want 100 times return on investment just because they are the first ones to believe in you oftentimes. Later investors, they don't have the same expected return. So for them, maybe 5 times the money is good enough, but then they take less risk as well. So really make sure you understand how much risk it is to invest in you and try to reduce that risk. So really put an effort into making your case seem like safe investment. And you do this by being really good at storytelling, pitching, branding, hyping up yourself, and really making sure that they buy into the story and the story makes sense. And it's, again, less risk than other early stage investments. Also, before you have metrics, so before you actually have statistics to show, it's obviously the worst timing to fundraise. So try to fundraise as little as possible before you have metrics, because before you have metrics, it's much more risk, and you will have to give up much more of your company to investors. Before you get investment, and also definitely after you get investment, you need to set clear goals, and your job is to do all you can to reach them. So if you set clear goals with your investors and you reach them, you will attract the attention of more investors, and you will get more investments from the same investors. So that is the most important of everything, to really set some good first metrics, KPIs, milestones, and really make sure that you hit these milestones and that they make sense. VCs always talk about these hockey sticks, right? So they want to see exponential growth. And when this exponential growth actually comes, then you need to be prepared for that as well, because that is the time to really scale, when you find product market fit, when things start to take off. It's also good to understand the strings attached to your funding. So not all money is the same. Not all money comes with no strings attached, or very few money, I would say. Like, could be government grants and that kind of stuff that could come to you without strings attached sometimes. But normally, VCs demand growth. So they buy a part of your company because they expect a lot of growth. Just like you would buy a stock on the stock market, for example, you expect it to grow. Funds are also quite short term, depending on who you talk to, but most funds are 10 years. So in 10 years, they need to give back maybe 100 times the money to the investors that they have, or maybe 20 times or 5 times, depending on when they invest with a fund. So if a fund invests in you, and this fund is halfway. So if they only have 5 years left of that fund, for example, they will expect you to return a lot of money to them in 5 years, which can be quite a short time for many startups. So always try to take in smart money if you can. If you cannot find smart money, take dumb money. Take any money that you can, basically, but try to take smart money, because if you have great advisors on board that can help you, that makes a lot of difference. Also, be smart about the equity as you scale your company. So obviously, when you start out, you own 100% between the founders, for example. But as you grow, you need to give away parts to investors, but also to employees. I think one of the main success or like main reasons why the Nordics have been quite successful in producing a lot of unicorns, for example, is that we have a really good employee stock program. So when you join an early stage or a scaling startup here in the Nordics, you usually get stock options and incentives, which can make you super duper rich if you actually join a unicorn as employee number 50 or 100 or 200 and that kind of stuff. And then oftentimes these people go back into the ecosystem again and invest the money and start new companies. Equity and offering incentives is also a great way to attract talent. So you really need to ask yourself why someone should work for you instead of working for Google or Amazon or Facebook and that kind of stuff. Because these are the people you want to attract to your company. If you're going to build a great company, if you're going to scale internationally and make a lot of traction, you need to have fantastic people on your team. So really hire people that are way smarter than yourself. Try to get the best people you can find. Oftentimes you find them in your own network from the beginning, but as you grow, you need to be smart about that as well. Also think about the cap tables, not to make them too messy. Don't take in like hundreds of different investors, because all of them need to sign legal documents, and if they don't add anything, you should really question yourself why they should be on the cap table. Focus on potential customers that understand. I think this is super important as well from the beginning. It's easy as a startup to talk to every kind of potential customer, but the customers that don't understand you, regardless if it's businesses or if it's consumers, don't spend your time on them. Really try to focus on the ones that buy into your product and ask them why they buy into your product, and try to find more customers that are similar to them. So don't make it hard on yourself, make it easy on yourself, and try to find the ones that understand what you're offering. Because to educate consumers to change behaviors is very, very tricky. It's very time consuming, and if you're a small company, you don't have the time and you don't have the budget, to be frank, to do that. So don't do it. Getting large clients, a lot of small companies oftentimes think they should they build something that would be great for a large enterprise company, for example, to buy. And it could be, but it takes a lot of time, and it's very challenging for startups to make progress and get large clients. Both because it's internal processes. I mean, for example, I work for a company. We have offices in 140 cities. We have like 10,000 employees. It's super tricky. Even if a startup approaches me and they have a great solution for us, I don't know where to start internally just to get them into our company and sign contracts and vet them and that kind of stuff. It's a long process. So even if you have people inside the organization that really like your product, it will probably take a lot of time. So if you're going to go for large clients, start small. Start with something that doesn't need approval from a lot of managers. Ask for something that has a small budget that can be signed off immediately. And then if you get something small to start with, try to really make a good case study for that internally to make that person internally or that team internally look successful, because they also have managers and they don't want to look like fools for trusting in you. They want to look like smart people. So try to make them look like smart people for collaborating with you. And try not to custom build. I see a lot of startups, they start to build stuff that is very custom for one large client. And then if that large client actually doesn't sign anything, you could be screwed, basically, because it can take a lot of time and resources for you. And generally, I have nothing to back this at all, but I think generally think that everything will take 3 times the time you think, at least. Also for large clients, really focus on the ones that understand you, right? Focus on the ones that publicly say that they work with startups and have programs for that and have divisions for that. Otherwise, it's going to be very problematic. Large clients will probably come to you once you are a large company, but it's difficult when they don't know you from the beginning because it's a big risk for them. When you found product market fit, when the hockey stick goes up, when users come to you, when things start to progress, that is the time to accelerate. So that is the time to hire. That is the time to hit the gas pedal. That is the time to have money in the bank. That is the time to have good employees, good advisors, people that have done it before, good investors by your side. Because if you found product market fit and you cannot, and you don't have the research to scale, the risk is that you will fade and someone else will see that you found product market fit and they will try to build something similar and they will succeed before you do. So when you have happy customers, when you're solving real needs, that is the time to really hit the gas pedal. When it comes to international expansion, that is something I've worked with basically all my life. It demands a detailed plan. I think many companies are very naive when they expand to new geographies. They think that the US is the same all over, for example, or Germany is one country, but it's really different, right? You need to have a detailed plan for every city, depending on your product. If you have a SaaS product, for example, maybe you don't even need to have people in all these different markets, and maybe you don't even need to have a detailed plan. Maybe you can just sell online even without thinking about this. But normally, at least when you have physical components, or if you're hiring locally and that kind of stuff, you really need to talk to experts on site and share best practices and really be mindful of which markets to go into and when. Culture is very easily lost, especially when growing fast. I joined WeWork, for example, I think in 1 year we went from 7,000 employees to 16,000, and then the year after we went down from 16,000 to 10,000, and now we're starting to hire again. But I've seen it firsthand. It's very tricky to keep a good company culture as you scale and grow and just hire new people. So be very mindful. I think creating rituals, writing down principles, celebrating diversity, and really focus and openly talking about the culture is super duper important. I think this is the last slide that I have. We're 32 minutes in, but I think this could potentially be the most important one. This is definitely one that I try to live as I preach. It's about networking. And I think a lot of people, especially engineers, maybe introverts, they see networking as something really superficial and something that is, like you mingle around with a beer in your hand and that kind of stuff. But it's not about that, right? It should be part of your weekly schedule, because if you don't have a strong network, you will not succeed. It's as simple as that. You have a slim chance, but the chance is very much smaller. So if you have a strong network of people around you that you build a fan base and you connect with new people weekly, you have a much higher chance of success. And I think, nowadays with LinkedIn, for example, I spend a lot of my time on LinkedIn. I always have it open, always have a tab open. I try to connect with a few new people every day, not randomly, people that I think are interesting, that are doing interesting initiatives. I reach out. I send them a link to book 15 minutes with me. Everyone has time for 15 minutes if it makes the slightest sense to talk to you. And then I always come in with a mindset to help. I think that is, if you're only going to remember one thing from today, I think that is it, to really go into meetings with a mindset to help. Because if you help someone after the first call, for example, help them out with something small and give first, they will remember and you will get back 10 times more. And don't be afraid to reach out cold as well. I think a lot of founders are terrified to reach out cold sometimes, but please try to do this oftentimes people in large organizations and so forth, they're not close to innovation. So they love to be contacted by entrepreneurs, and they love to contribute in different ways. So don't be afraid to ask for help. That's a lot of slides in 34 minutes, but some of these observations resonated with you guys, and you can benefit. Just add me on LinkedIn, send me an email, and happy to open up for some questions from the moderators and the audience.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was quite interesting, and also lots of insights for lots of startups. I think it was really quite good and productive, cool presentation. Thank you very much. Yeah, we have lots of questions for you, and one first question, it will be like to think about maybe, or to even to imagine that sometimes startups are divided into two teams, and one team thinks that if scaling is a problem, you are not ready for that and you should stop and not try to do it. But other teams think that if scaling is a problem for you, it means that you have done a good job and you shouldn't stop and try to scale. And what team do you support, and what do you think about it? If scaling is really a problem for a startup?
Yeah, I can go back a little bit here. I think this is it, right? So you scale when you find product market fit. So I wouldn't scale before I found product market fit, because then you're going to scale the wrong thing. So really, again, I can go back to, I put it here. Once, move fast when needed. So when you found something that works, then it's the time to scale, basically. And then you need to scale super fast. Then you probably need to blitz scale in some cases, right? So really put the pedal at the max.
Thank you a lot. And also, when we wrote about you, we also said that you are an expert with dealing with corporation. And we got one question from a startup, and he wrote to us. My question is quite trivial: how to pass a long corporate sales cycle to a startup and not die of cash run out, especially when you cannot display actual traction to investors, because the sales cycle of the first deal is too long. It makes it hard to find investors with almost no cool metrics, but numbers of pilots and ideas.
I think I touched a little bit on this as well, but it's definitely a common problem that it's two different worlds, right? So if you talk to large companies, they have very long sales cycles, and for startups, that is very, very difficult. If you're working in a business where all sales cycles are long, like all your customers have long sales cycles, you need to have more money saved up, and you probably need to get your potential customers to co-finance to some extent. Well, maybe you can co-develop the product, and maybe they can sign some kind of letter of intent, at least, that they will buy the product if it actually works, or maybe they can even pre-order and sign some agreements to buy units before they are produced, to really make sure you don't produce something that is capital intensive before you have the customer space. Because if you have something signed with a customer, then you can go to the bank and get loans, usually with that as well, or go to investors and get money. But again, I think the most important is to focus on the customers that understand you. Like I said, if it's large customers, talk to the ones that work with startups already. If it's consumers, B2C, talk to the ones that understand you, because then the sales cycles will be shorter. So really try to reduce them as much as possible.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And also about corporation, maybe you have such situation with what are corporation looking for? Are they looking for the startup markets or some kind of this? I mean, in one Russian company, it's a huge company that also invests in startups. It wrote on their blog that they don't even communicate with startups who are aimed only at one market. And the other venture fund replied that they are in their fund, they are looking for startups, they're looking for stars, and they are not caring about one market or like two markets have a startup. And maybe you can say from your side, from corporation that you talked to, or you have like strong relations with corporation, or what are corporations in Europe are targeting for? Is it important for them to have huge startups with lots of markets, or they are just invest in teams?
It's a great question. It's a tricky question to some extent because I don't know how many they are, but there are thousands of different investors all across Europe and the world, and everyone has a different idea, right? Everyone comes in with different skill sets, different backgrounds, different motives. So it really depends on the individual investors. Some investors have had success, for example, and they have a lot of money, and they just want to give back. They only want to support startups that want to make a big impact and help the world get to a better place, for example. Maybe they don't even expect to get all the money back. So it's more of a philanthropy and social service, basically. So you have these kind of investors. On the other hand, you have these kind of hardcore investors that only want to see a lot of profit. It's only about the money. They don't care really about the idea as long as it can make them a lot of money. They look at different things, right? And they can be very tough to the startups, and they will expect a lot from the startups. Then you have large corporates. Normally why large corporates invest is because they want to stay relevant. So if it's like a large car manufacturer, for example, say Audi or something, they most likely invest in startups to be able to get new innovation into their company in order for them to be relevant and build the best cars in 2030, 2040, 2050, and that. So they're definitely working a lot with startups in electric vehicles, for example, and buying a lot of innovation in electric vehicles and that. So you really need to look at the individual investor, what kind of motives they have. I think one good thing to remember also is most VCs have a lot of investors backing them. So the VC, normally they don't invest their own money. They invest money from all kinds of other entities that have invested in the fund. But if you talk to an angel, for example, an angel oftentimes invests her or his own money. So they can decide a little bit more themselves and have their own thesis. But VCs, they invest someone else's money. So it's oftentimes that other person or entity that decides where the money should be spent. I would say most serious investors, large scale VCs and so forth, they only invest in ideas that are global or could be global. So looking at many markets and big markets.
Thanks a lot. And also, if you talk about investor, I want to ask you a question. We got a question from the startup about your investors' experience. Have you changed the criteria for evaluating startups? You know that maybe before COVID, investors always looked at teams, business models, traction, and lots of this. And now some of Russian even investors now are taking they make decision due to economic impact of COVID-19 for a startup. And what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think a lot of investors got scared. Right. So everyone invested a little bit less, at least for the first 6 months. A lot of investors really focused on putting more money into the investments they already made. I think also, like, if you don't have a product that works during COVID, you probably need to change it as well. So I think a lot of investors, they really looked at all the investments that they've made and also all the investments that they're going to do. And they basically say, okay, so let's only invest in things that work during a pandemic, because pandemics can come again. And I think the society after the pandemic will be a mix between what it was before the pandemic and what it has been after, during the pandemic as well. So everyone wants solutions that that works in a post-pandemic world.
Yeah, thank you very much. And also, I want to ask you maybe the last question, but I think that it's a very important question. I have watched your interview and with Fares Ali, and you have said about your office and WeWork office in Stockholm, and you said that it's not a hospital, but an essential place that should be open. Do you believe in online community? Or it should be offline and online?
I think both is important. I read a lot of books and try to listen to a lot of podcasts and stuff. And what you can see, like how Silicon Valley became the place it has become for startups, and how London became that as well, and also what happened in Stockholm. I think a huge part of it is actually having physical locations and physical meeting points where you can host events, where people can meet, where they can drink coffee, and this kind of networking is happening. Again, I don't know, that is probably not what you want to hear, given that your office has been shut down, but I think physical spaces are important, but they are less important now than they ever were. I think it's easier now than ever before to build an online community and keep an online community vibrant. And people have less need to meet. But I think sometimes it's good to have physical meetings as well, in order for that spontaneous networking to happen. Because the spontaneous networking doesn't happen to the same extent in the online world yet. But I think that's going to change as well. I'm 100% sure. Like in a few years, we will be doing a lot more VR meetings, and all the platforms will be much better for networking and that kind of stuff as well. So I think regardless if you get a physical space again or not, you can definitely build a great community online as well. But it's tougher. It's more difficult.
But we also think about online just community for maybe several months or half a year, but then we want to have office, because the community of people, when they're working together, when they're creating together, it's quite, some very impactful for the world, I think, because lots of great companies in Belarus, they were created during hackathons when the people work together, not online, just together in our office. And it's really important to have, and I agree with you that it should be like physical place to be and to work with people.
Yep.
And thank you very much for joining us today. It was quite interesting to talk with you, to listen to your presentation. Quite cool. And if you don't mind, our startups are always like asking us to share presentation of our speakers. So if you don't mind, I will share them with our community. And Thank you very much for joining us today. And guys, thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for being with us in this sad rainy day, and I wish you to have quite good evening and have productive week. Thank you. See you. Bye bye.